Last year, my son came home with a note from his school. A routine eye exam revealed something that my wife and I, who having cared for our son for the 10 years of his life, had failed to suspect. He couldn't see clearly. So we made an appointment to go see an optometrist for him to get fitted for some glasses. And while he was seeing the optometrist getting tested, I sat there in the waiting room reading this comprehensive report that the school had provided, and I found myself actually getting filled with a sense of gratitude. Gratitude that the school recognized that having clear vision is not only important for his success, but his well-being as well. Now, as I was sitting there in the waiting room reading this document, I noticed that the optometrist was also glancing over at me from time to time. I must have been squinting, because before I knew it, he was marching directly towards me with a smile on his face and a pair of glasses in hand. And I thought, interesting. Well, he said, humor me, just try these on. Now, I was skeptical. I have had perfect vision my entire life. And yet, as soon as these glasses fell over my eyes, I blurted out loudly, "Oh, that's much better." In an instant, the blur that I had become so accustomed to all these years simply vanished away. Everything looked different. And yet, the world hadn't changed, just the way that I was looking at it. That moment got me thinking a lot, and not just about vision, but of all the subtle ways in which sometimes we might be missing what's right in front of our face. You see, each one of us has our own particular way of seeing things. We carry with us a set of beliefs and mindsets that we use on a daily basis to make meaning of the events that happen in our lives. And just like that lens can help us to notice the details that we might have previously overlooked, I wondered if perhaps, possibly, subtle adjustments to our mindset can also dramatically change the way that we understand the nature of challenge, difficulty, struggle, opportunity, possibility. Today, I want to see what it looks like to make these subtle adjustments, these small shifts in our perceptions that can dramatically change the way that we understand challenges and adversity. Now, to do this, I'm actually going to start by asking you all a question that I'd like you to reflect on and answer in your own minds. If you had to be honest with yourself, now you got to be honest with yourself. If you had to be honest with yourself, what percentage of your full potential do you feel you are currently living up to? Now, whatever that percentage is, keep that in mind. Now, I have worked with thousands of students and athletes and professionals, and in all of the workshops that I offer on peak performance, working with the most disciplined, the most accomplished individuals, the tip of the arrow kind of individual, the answer I rarely ever get is 100%. What was your percentage? Yeah. Now, let me ask you a second, slightly more complex question. What's holding you back? What's stopping you from reaching your full potential? Again, I've asked this same question to these thousands of individuals across 10 or more years of running these workshops. And do you know what answer I have never gotten, not one single time? The answer I never get is how hard that thing they're trying to master is. It's never about the difficulty of the task. Instead, what I hear over and over again is that it has to do with these internal and invisible forces. Things like self-doubt, concerns with being focused enough, being motivated enough, finding one's passion, wondering if you belong. Now, I, as a social psychologist specializing in motivation and performance, can tell you with confidence that there are decades worth of research on exactly these forces. And there are some proven strategies on how to overcome these challenges. Today, one of the goals that I have is to try to give you a brief glimpse into some of these adaptive mindsets. Now, to understand what's really happening, we have to understand that these small shifts in our beliefs and our mindsets are very subtle, because often what happens is that our mindsets are driven by the small and quiet questions that we ask ourselves when things get tough or challenging. Now today, I hope to give you a glimpse into some of these hidden mindsets that we have. But we have to understand that these mindsets are actually rooted in these quiet questions that we have. The quiet questions that we ask ourselves when things do get hard and difficult. The questions that we ask ourselves can include things like, can I do this? Do I belong? Am I smart enough? Or am I alone? You see, these questions we rarely ever talk about, and often we don't include how to resolve these questions in our classrooms, in our athletic programs, or in our professional settings. And that's one of the goals I have here today, is to help to uncover how these powerful tools can be made accessible to our environments. But as we ask ourselves these questions, we also have to understand how people answer these questions. Now, because they're hidden, we often don't talk about them. In my work, I've realized that I call this missing piece of not talking about how people resolve these questions the hidden curriculum of success, which includes these small mindset shifts that can dramatically change the way that you engage and relate to challenges and adversity. Now, I might give you a glimpse into this hidden curriculum, and the way that I'll do that is by introducing you to what I call adaptive mindsets for success, which are these small shifts in our perspectives that can set us up for success. And the way that we do that, we have to understand again that these mindsets are based on the quiet questions that we ask ourselves. Questions like, am I smart enough? Do I belong? Can I do this? And so today, my hope is that by the end of this talk, you too will have a moment of clarity where at the end of this presentation, you will also say, oh, that's much better. And what I'm going to do is give you a very small sample of a couple of these adaptive mindsets that I've been working to introduce in our training programs. So let's dive in. The first adaptive mindset strategy that I'm going to introduce you to is one that I call moving from prove to improve. Here, what we try to do is change the questions that people ask, which usually has to do with can I do it, to how can I do it. You see, when we face challenges, true, genuine challenges, we often wonder quietly to ourselves, am I smart enough? Am I good enough? Can I actually do this? I call this the prove mindset, because here we're focused on trying to prove our worth to other people. Here, the stakes seem high, and failure feels scary. So we feel a sense of anxiety, of hesitation, and we become risk-averse. But there's a second mindset that I call the prove mindset, the improve mindset, excuse me. And in the improve mindset, what we do is something very subtle, but that has a big effect. Instead of asking, can I, we ask, how can I? That simple shift seems simple, but it's powerful. Because when you ask, how can I, instead of can I, you automatically remove even the possibility of considering that you might be deficient in some way. Instead, you are driven to act, to seek out strategies that help you to improve rather than worrying about proving your worth to other people. Now, one of the best examples of this improved mindset happens when we watch a child who's learning how to walk. Now, they fall dozens of times a day trying to learn how to walk. And yet, at no point does the child or the parent worry or conclude that maybe it's just not going to happen. Maybe they just can't do it. Maybe it's not in the cards for this one. No. They get up over and over again, trying, because they know that learning how to walk is imminent. There's no other option. And the reason why this happens so beautifully with children is because they start with a very sound belief that there is no other option. They don't question their abilities. And how this works in grown-ups is through another process called recursive processes. This is a sequence in which your initial beliefs determine how you behave, or how long you persist, which in turn impacts how likely you are to achieve a particular outcome, which then in turn spirals back up and confirms whatever initial belief that you had. So when you watch a child walk, it seems effortless, but it's because they began with that initial belief. Now, another great example of this process is imagine two students who on the first day of their math class, on their first year of college, and on that first test, get that first grade, which happens to be their first D grade. Not great. Now, Jane, who has an improved mindset, sees this grade as an example of how she might be able to learn better. So Jane is going to reach out to her professor, work in peer groups, seek out tutoring, and in turn is probably going to do better on that next test, which then in turn spirals back up and reconfirms her assumption that it's not whether she can learn, it's how she can learn better. Now, John, in contrast, who gets that same D in that math class, instead confirms and worries that maybe he's just not smart enough. Maybe he really is an admissions error like we all think we are. And he decides that dropping out of college is the only possibility. So you can imagine the chances that John's going to reach out to his professor, look for tutoring, work in peers. And you can also imagine the likelihood that John reconfirms his initial belief that he's just not smart enough. That's how these recursive processes work. But when we realize that it has to do with the questions, not intelligence or ability, then we can change the nature of question from can I to how can I. And in so doing, you remove the possibility of concluding that you cannot do it. Now I'm going to leave you with my second adaptive mindset strategy, which I call moving from me to we. And in this one, we shift our focus on resilience, but not the version you're used to hearing about. When people talk about resilience, they talk about it as though it's an individual toughness index. Dig deep, push through, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, they say. But in reality, when you're running on empty, there's no reserve. There's no secret way in which grit comes to the rescue. You've got nothing left to give. And so when you actually observe truly resilient people in the wild, what you notice is that they reach out to others early and often. They lean on each other, and they show up for other people in return. That's because these individuals have internalized the belief that resilience is not an individual trait. It's a quality of your networks. And so they invest in those networks. Now, despite this, and despite knowing this even, many of us hesitate to connect because we believe that we're still the only ones struggling. Now, psychologists call this pluralistic ignorance. In Stanford, they call it duck syndrome. Calm on the surface, paddling like mad underneath, all the while thinking you're the only one. Unfortunately, this illusion isolates us. And instead of possibly asking the question, am I strong enough alone? Imagine if we asked, who can support me and who can I support? Then resilience becomes shared, strength becomes collective. Because when you understand that resilience isn't a solo game, it's a social game, you also understand that together we're a lot stronger than we are alone. I'm going to end by reminding us that today, some of these powerful insights are rarely shared in our classrooms or athletic programs or professional environments. And my mission and my invitation to you today is to simply join me and pull this hidden curriculum out from the shadows and into the light. Because when we change the quiet questions that we ask ourselves, we change how we see, we change how we act, and we change how we grow. Imagine a world where every student, athlete, and professional shifted from worrying about having to prove their worth to wanting to improve their abilities, from fearing that they're alone to building community, from wondering quietly if they belong to openly connecting with other people. In this world, I imagine that we'll take one step closer to unleashing our collective human potential. Now, when I picture this world, I can't help but think, oh, that's much better. And I hope you do too. Thank you.